The laughter began before Elena Ashcombe reached the doorway. It drifted from the Duke's private dining room, low and amused, carried by candlelight and the scent of expensive wine. She paused, not because she intended to listen, because she heard her husband's voice. "Surely Her Grace contributes something to your life." A gentleman's teasing question. The room chuckled. Then came Sebastian's reply. The Duke of Blackthorn did not often joke. When he did, people listened. Elena waited and heard the words that seemed to drain all warmth from her body. "If Elena vanished tomorrow, I suspect my life would continue exactly as it does today." Laughter, Maury laughter. Someone attempted to soften it. "That is rather harsh, is merely honest." His voice remained calm, measured, untroubled. "Respect my wife. She is pleasant company when required, but my estate existed before her. My responsibilities remain my own. She contributes very little to the practical workings of my life." Room moved on, the conversation changed, but Elena remained frozen in the corridor, 27 years old, married for 5 years, and suddenly unsure whether she had ever truly existed inside her husband's world. She turned before anyone could see her, walked through the candlelit hallway, down the grand staircase, past servants who greeted her, past portraits lining the walls, past the library she had reorganized, past the household office where she spent hours solving problems no one knew existed. Past everything, she reached her chambers, closed the door, and sat alone in silence. No tears came, not immediately. The pain felt too large for tears. For 5 years she had quietly managed endless difficulties, delayed disputes between tenants, household shortages, problems among servants, charitable obligations, guest arrangements, family tensions, social disasters, hundreds of invisible burdens. Whenever trouble threatened Blackthorn House, Elena found a solution before Sebastian ever heard of it, not because anyone asked, because she believed that was what partnership meant. Now she wondered whether he even knew or cared. Outside, winter rain tapped softly against the windows. Inside, the silence stretched. Then finally she whispered into the empty room. Well, the next morning, Elena changed nothing publicly. At breakfast she remained composed, graceful, polite, the perfect Duchess. Sebastian looked exactly as he always did, tall, reserved, impeccably controlled. He glanced briefly over his newspaper. "Will you attend Lady Whitmore's gathering tomorrow?" "Perhaps." His eyes lifted. "Perhaps not, yes, not no, a small difference, yet somehow noticeable." "I see." Neither mentioned the previous evening, neither mentioned anything important. The distance between them had never felt wider. 3 days later the first problem arrived, a dispute between 2 senior housekeepers. Normally Elena would have resolved it before breakfast. Instead she simply listened, then said gently, "I am certain you will find a solution." Women looked confused. By evening the disagreement had spread through the staff. The following week a supplier failed to deliver essential goods. Again Elena remained silent. The estate manager eventually brought the issue to Sebastian. For the first time, he spent an entire afternoon addressing something Elena usually handled alone. It irritated him, only slightly, but enough to notice. By the end of the month, dozens of small inconveniences had begun appearing throughout Blackthorn House. Nothing catastrophic, simply endless: a missing shipment, conflicting guest arrangements, scheduling errors, tenant complaints, charitable requests, each insignificant, together exhausting. Sebastian found himself increasingly distracted. One evening he entered the library, expecting quiet. Instead he found Elena seated beside the fire, reading peacefully. For once she did not appear occupied by estate matters. The sight unsettled him. "You seem relaxed." She looked up. A faint smile touched her lips. "I am," he frowned. For reasons he could not explain, disappointment stirred inside him. "Have you abandoned your various projects?" "I have merely stopped interfering." Her voice remained gentle, yet something inside the words felt unfamiliar. Before he could respond, she returned to her book, dismissing him without intending to. For the first time in years, Sebastian stood uncertainly in his own library, watching his wife, wondering why the room suddenly felt different, and why her absence from his responsibilities seemed far more noticeable than her presence had ever been. The spring season arrived with invitations, social obligations, and endless expectations. Blackthorn House filled with guests. Ordinarily, Elena managed everything with effortless precision. This year she did not intentionally, simply consistently. When problems appeared, she allowed others to handle them, especially Sebastian. At first society noticed nothing, then mistakes began appearing, small mistakes. A duke's dinner delayed because guest accommodations had been confused. An important political visitor accidentally seated beside a rival. A charity event poorly coordinated, nothing disastrous. yet unusual for Blackthorn House. People talked quietly. One evening at a ballroom in London, Elena stood near a column watching dancers glide beneath crystal chandeliers. The orchestra filled the room with music. Laughter echoed, diamonds glittered. Across the room she saw Sebastian speaking with several gentlemen. As always, people gravitated toward him. Power followed him naturally, yet tonight he looked tired. A strange sight. Lady Whitmore approached. "Your husband appears exhausted." Elena glanced toward him. "He has many responsibilities." Lady Whitmore laughed softly. "More than usual, I suspect." Older woman studied her carefully, far too carefully. "You have stopped rescuing him?" Elena nearly smiled. "I do not know what you mean." "Of course you do." The conversation ended there, but the observation lingered. Across the ballroom, Sebastian's gaze unexpectedly found hers. For a moment everything else faded, the music, the crowd, the noise, just one silent glance. Then a young viscount approached Elena, Lord Nathaniel Hartwell, kind. Intelligent, recently returned from military service. "Your Grace." He bowed, she smiled politely. The conversation that followed was harmless, entirely appropriate. Yet several times she noticed Sebastian watching, not continuously, not obviously, just enough, a glance, then another, then another. Something tightened inside her chest. For years she had longed for his attention. Now she found it unexpectedly difficult to interpret. Later that evening, Nathaniel offered his arm during supper. Again, entirely proper. Again Sebastian noticed. This time his expression changed, only slightly, a brief hardening of his jaw, gone almost immediately, yet Elena saw it and wondered. The thought followed her home. Days later rain fell steadily across the countryside. Elena sat inside a carriage returning from a charity visit when one wheel became trapped in deep mud. The driver struggled, hours passed, cold seeped into the air, twilight approached, then distant hoofbeats emerged through the rain. A rider appeared, Sebastian, water darkened his coat, rain streaked through his hair. His horse stopped beside the carriage. Relief flashed across his face, raw, immediate, unexpected. "Elena," she stared. "What are you doing here?" "I was informed your carriage was delayed." "You came yourself?" The question escaped before she could stop it. Something unreadable crossed his features. "Of course." For a moment neither spoke. Rain drummed softly around them. The silence felt strangely intimate. Then he dismounted. Hours later, after arrangements were made, they shared the carriage home. The storm surrounded them. The small space felt unusually quiet. "You could have sent servants," she said. "I could have." "You came." "Yes." Again silence. Then Sebastian looked toward the rain-covered window. "You always handled these situations." Elena's fingers tightened around her gloves. Yes." "You never seemed aware." The words slipped out before she intended them to. He turned slowly, neither looked away. For the first time in years, genuine discomfort appeared in his eyes. The realization seemed to strike him all at once. Not fully, not yet, but enough. Enough to make him question things he had never examined before. And for the first time, Elena saw uncertainty in the man who always seemed certain of everything. It should have satisfied her, instead it hurt. Because part of her still wished he had noticed long ago. As spring deepened, something began changing between them. Not dramatically, quietly, dangerously. Sebastian started observing, noticing, paying attention. At breakfast, he watched how servants instinctively sought Elena's approval. During social gatherings, he noticed how guests relaxed when she entered a room. At estate meetings, he realized how often people previously approached her before approaching him. The discoveries accumulated, each one unsettling. One afternoon, he entered the household office, a room he rarely visited. Records lined shelves, letters filled organized boxes, ledgers occupied entire cabinets. The house steward greeted him nervously. "Your Grace." Sebastian looked around. "The Duchess manage all this?" The steward blinked. "Most of it, sir." "Most," the word echoed. For years he had assumed Elena occupied herself with pleasant hobbies. Instead, evidence of her labor surrounded him. Invisible labor, endless labor, necessary labor. That evening he found himself watching her during dinner. She laughed at something his sister said. The sound caught him off guard. When had he last truly listened to her laugh? He could not remember. The realization disturbed him. Across the table, Elena seemed brighter lately, lighter, as though she had finally stopped carrying a burden. The burden, Sebastian slowly realized, might have been him. Weeks later, London hosted another grand gathering. This time, Elena attracted considerable attention, not because she sought it, because confidence suited her. People noticed. Gentlemen noticed most of all. Nathaniel Hartwell appeared frequently, always respectful, always charming, always making Elena smile. Sebastian disliked it immediately. He told himself the feeling was protective concern, nothing more. Then he saw Nathaniel place a shawl around Elena's shoulders when evening air turned cold. A simple gesture, perfectly innocent. Sebastian spent the remainder of the evening unable to focus on any conversation. The realization arrived slowly. Then all at once, jealousy, sharp, unwelcome, unmistakable. The discovery followed him home. 3 nights later he stood alone in the library, unable to read. The fire crackled softly, rain touched the windows. And every thought returned to Elena, not the Duchess, not the estate manager, not the capable woman solving problems. Elena, the woman herself, her smile, her patience, her quiet strength, the way she always remembered details others forgot, the way she noticed loneliness in a room, the way she made difficult things seem effortless. Had those qualities always been there, or had he simply never looked closely enough? A knock interrupted him. His sister entered. "You appear miserable." Sebastian sighed. "Thank you." She laughed. "When did you become an idiot?" He stared. "What? You love your wife?" Silence. His sister continued. "Everyone can see it except you." The words landed like a blow, because somewhere deep inside he already knew love should have brought clarity. Instead it brought panic. Once Sebastian recognized his feelings, every interaction changed, every glance mattered, every absence mattered more. Elena seemed unaware, or perhaps she simply no longer expected anything from him. That possibility frightened him most. He began seeking reasons to spend time with her, walks through gardens, estate discussions, shared meals, conversations that once lasted minutes now stretched longer. Yet Elena remained careful, polite, warm, distant. The distance was earned. Sebastian understood that now. One afternoon they visited tenants together. The countryside glowed beneath early summer sunlight. Children ran through fields. Families greeted them warmly. Throughout the day Sebastian watched Elena interact with everyone she met. No performance, no pretension, only genuine kindness. Admiration deepened into something heavier, something harder to contain. That evening, while returning home by carriage, Elena fell asleep. Exhaustion softened her features. For several moments Sebastian simply watched. A dangerous tenderness filled his chest. Fear accompanied it, because he suddenly understood how much he could lose, and how close he already was to losing it. Rumors arrived before disaster. Society began speculating about Nathaniel Hartwell's admiration for the Duchess. Most stories exaggerated reality, some did not. Nathaniel genuinely cared for Elena, though he never crossed propriety. One evening during a country gathering he spoke quietly beside a garden fountain. "You deserve to be cherished." Elena looked away. The words touched an old wound. "I am well enough. You are lonely." Truth struck too close. Before she could answer, another voice interrupted. "Lord Hartwell." Sebastian. Nathaniel stepped back immediately. Nothing improper had occurred, yet tension flooded the air. Afterward Elena confronted Sebastian. "You embarrassed him. Was speaking intimately with my wife. Was speaking kindly." Argument escalated, not loudly, worse, quietly, painfully. At last Elena, "Does it matter now?" The question silenced him, because he knew exactly what she meant. Why now? Why after years of distance? Why after years of neglect? Why only when someone else noticed her worth? He had no answer that could erase the past, and Elena walked away before he could try. Summer faded, autumn arrived. The distance between them became unbearable, not because Elena chased him, because she stopped, completely. For the first time since their marriage, she seemed emotionally independent, peaceful, prepared for a future that might not include his affection. Sebastian watched it happen with growing despair. Then came the announcement. Elena intended to spend several months at her late grandmother's estate alone. The news struck him harder than expected. "When do you leave?" "Next week." His chest tightened. "So soon?" She nodded, neither spoke. The silence stretched. Finally Sebastian asked, "Will you miss me?" The vulnerability shocked them both. Elena's expression softened, then saddened. "Once I would have." Words broke something inside him, because they were honest. And deserved. That night he did not sleep. For the first time in his life, the Duke of Blackthorn felt utterly powerless. The morning of her departure arrived beneath grey skies. Carriages waited, servants moved quietly, everything felt wrong. Elena stood on the front steps preparing to leave. Then Sebastian appeared, breathless, uncharacteristically disheveled. Everyone stopped, even the servants sensed something important. "Elena." She turned, his voice shook. The sight stunned her. The Duke never appeared uncertain. Today he looked terrified. "I was wrong." Silence filled the courtyard, years of restraint fractured. "I thought strength meant independence." His eyes never left hers. "I thought needing no one was admirable." Emotion thickened his voice. "I did not understand that you carried half my world." Tears filled Elena's eyes. He stepped closer. "You solved problems I never saw." Another step. "You protected me from burdens I never noticed." Another, and worst of all, his voice nearly broke. I convinced myself you were unimportant because I was too blind to see your value. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. The moment belonged entirely to them. Love you. Confession landed softly, yet carried years of regret, years of longing, years of misunderstanding. I love you, Alina. And for the first time she saw the full truth in his eyes, not duty, not obligation, love, real love, desperate love, terrified love, the kind that feared loss. Part 8. Rain began falling gently. No one seemed to notice. Alina stared at the man she had loved for years, the man who had finally opened his heart. Part of her wanted to run into his arms. Another part remembered every lonely night, every disappointment, every silent hurt. Healing required honesty, so she gave him honesty. You hurt me. I know. I waited years. I know. Tears slipped down her cheeks. I stopped hopping. Pain flashed across his face. I know. Neither rushed forward, neither pretended the wounds did not exist. Instead they stood together inside the truth, and somehow that honesty felt more intimate than any embrace. At last Sebastian spoke. I cannot change what I failed to see. Rain shimmered around them. But I will spend the rest of my life proving I see it now. The words settled between them, steady, certain, earned. Slowly Alina approached. The distance disappeared one step at a time, just as their love had, just as their healing would. When she finally reached him, she offered her hand. Nothing more, nothing less. A beginning. Sebastian took it carefully, as though receiving something precious, something fragile, something he intended never to lose again. Months passed, not perfect months, real ones. Conversations replaced assumptions, partnership replaced distance, gratitude replaced neglect. Love became visible through daily choices, shared breakfasts, walks through gardens, late evenings beside library fires, quiet moments, small moments, the moments that truly build a life. One winter evening, Alina stood in the ballroom of Blackthorn House watching guests dance beneath candlelight. The same room that once felt lonely, now it felt different, warm, alive, home. Sebastian approached. His gaze immediately found hers. It always did now. What are you thinking about? She smiled. The past. And her eyes softened. I think we finally found each other. Emotion flickered across his face. The expression still surprised her. The once distant Duke had become remarkably easy to read where she was concerned. He offered his hand. Dance with me. Orchestra began playing. She accepted. As they moved across the ballroom, conversations faded into the background. For a few moments there was only music, only warmth, only the quiet certainty that love had survived what pride nearly destroyed, not because it arrived easily, because it was finally understood. Years later people would describe the Duke and Duchess of Blackthorn as perfectly matched, a partnership admired throughout society. What nobody realized was how close they had come to losing everything, how many invisible sacrifices had once gone unnoticed, how much courage it had taken to begin again. But Alina knew, Sebastian knew, and perhaps that knowledge made their happiness sweeter. The laughter that echoed through Blackthorn House no longer hurt. The silence no longer felt lonely. The burdens no longer belonged to one person alone. At last, they carried them together. And when Sebastian looked at his wife now, he no longer saw someone standing quietly beside his life. He saw the woman who had always been holding it together, the woman he almost lost before he truly learned how to love her. And every single day thereafter, he made certain she never doubted her place in his world again.